My name is Daniel Vance, and I once believed in the kind of love stories that last forever. 6 years of my life were dedicated to what I thought was an unbreakable bond. Sophia, my wife, wasn't just beautiful, she was radiant. At 31, she possessed a poise and charm that captivated everyone she met. I adored that about her. She could turn an ordinary moment into something extraordinary, and being with her made the world feel whole. Our marriage wasn't flawless, but whose is? What made ours work, I believed, was the trust we had for each other. Or so I thought. Looking back, maybe I was too blind, too willing to believe that the love we shared could weather anything. She wasn't just my wife. She was my best friend, my partner in every sense. We'd laugh for hours about the silliest things. Her voice was the melody of my mornings, her laughter the lullaby of my nights. But let me tell you about the start. When I first met Sophia, she wasn't like anyone I'd ever encountered. She had this infectious energy, the kind that makes you want to follow her wherever she went. Her smile wasn't just an expression, it was an invitation. People gravitated toward her, and I was no exception. The first time I saw her, I knew she'd change my life. I wasn't wrong about that, just not in the way I expected. For years, our life together felt like a dream. We traveled, we built a home, and we shared moments that felt eternal. I can still remember the way she'd look at me when I told her one of my dumb jokes, half amused, half exasperated, but always with love. She had this habit of scrunching her nose when she was annoyed, and I'd tease her about it just to see her try to stop herself from doing it. But as time went on, there was one subject we couldn't agree on: starting a family. I longed for children, for a home filled with the chaos and joy of parenthood. Sophia, however, always hesitated. Soon, Daniel, she would say, just a little more time. I granted her that time, year after year, convinced her love for me would eventually align our futures. Our intimacy, however, was never in question. If anything, it was one of the strongest parts of our marriage. It wasn't merely physical, it was the way she would pull me closer in moments of vulnerability, the unspoken language in her touch. Holding her in my arms was my refuge, a place where I felt safe and invincible. I'd be lying if I said I didn't take pride in being her husband. The world saw her as this incredible, untouchable woman, and yet, she was mine. Or so I thought. Love has a way of fooling you, making you see what you want instead of what's there. I believed Sophia loved me with the same depth I loved her. I trusted her blindly, which turned out to be my greatest mistake. They say trust is the foundation of any relationship, and when it breaks, the entire structure collapses. I'm not telling you this to garner pity. I don't want that. What I want is for you to understand the man I was before everything fell apart, the Daniel Vance who loved with everything he had, who believed in the sanctity of marriage, who thought love could conquer all. That man doesn't exist anymore. If you're wondering how I got here, how I went from being a devoted husband to a man filled with a cold, unyielding rage, it started with a single event, a moment that shattered everything I believed in. And as I share my story, you'll see how quickly love can turn into something unrecognizable, something dark and consuming. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, just know this. I loved Sophia with every fiber of my being. And that love, as beautiful as it once was, became the very thing that destroyed me. Looking back now, I wonder if the signs were always there. Little moments that didn't seem like much at the time but carried the weight of 1,000 truths I didn't want to see. Hindsight, they say, is a cruel teacher. It shows you what you missed when it's far too late to change the outcome. Sophia had always been outgoing, the kind of woman who thrived in social settings. She loved the attention, and I loved that about her. Or at least, I thought I did. She could light up a room with her laugh, and people, men especially, were drawn to her. I didn't mind at first. In fact, I found it flattering. The woman every man in the room was staring at was mine. It gave me a sense of pride, a smug sort of satisfaction. But then there were the parties, work events, gatherings with friends, any excuse for her to dress up and be the center of attention. She had a way of making everything she wore look like it was designed just for her. Her dresses always hugged her figure in all the right ways, turning heads wherever we went. At first, I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? She was my wife, and I trusted her. The first time I felt that gnawing sense of unease was a year ago, at the company holiday gala. She'd worn a dress that left little to the imagination, and while I could see the admiration in the eyes of others, I also saw something else: desire. Men weren't just looking at her. They were imagining things that should have made me furious, but didn't. Not yet. That evening, she danced with Marcus Thorne, the charismatic vice president of her firm, a man I detested on sight. He was the epitome of corporate success, polished, wealthy, and oozing a confidence that bordered on arrogance. I hated the way his eyes roamed over Sophia, as if she were a prize he was assessing. But she laughed off my concerns, telling me I had nothing to worry about. "You're my husband, Daniel," she'd said, her smile dazzling. "No one else even comes close." I chose to believe her, pushing aside the image of his hand resting on the small of her back a moment too long. As the months went on, the unease grew. It wasn't just Marcus. It was the way Sophia started spending more time at work events, coming home later than usual. She always had an excuse, a perfectly reasonable explanation that made me feel guilty for even questioning her. "You know how demanding my job can be," she'd say. "These events are important for networking. It's not like I'm out having fun." And yet, she seemed to thrive on these outings. She'd come home flushed, her eyes bright, as if she'd just returned from an adventure. She always dismissed my concerns with a kiss, a joke, or a reminder of how much she loved me. And I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. But there were other things, small things that didn't add up. Her phone, which she'd always left lying around, now seemed glued to her hand. She'd smile at messages she wouldn't share and dismiss my curiosity with a casual, just work stuff. I started to notice how she'd get a little too dressed up for certain events. She'd ask for my opinion on outfits, spinning around and smiling at me like a girl getting ready for her first date. And while I loved seeing her happy, a part of me wondered who she was really dressing up for. Every time I brought up my concerns, she'd laugh and say, "Daniel, you're being ridiculous. Don't you trust me?" And I did. I trusted her because I loved her. But love, I've learned, can make a fool out of the smartest man. That unease, the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, became a constant companion. I tried to push it aside, to tell myself I was imagining things. After all, Sophia was my wife, the woman I'd promised to spend my life with. She wouldn't betray me. She couldn't. But as the holiday gala approached again, that feeling grew stronger. It was no longer a whisper in the back of my mind. It was a shout, demanding to be heard. And for the first time, I couldn't ignore it. Something was wrong, and I was about to find out just how wrong. That night, I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself to trust her, to trust us. But deep down, I knew the truth. The seeds of doubt had already been planted, and it was only a matter of time before they grew into something I couldn't ignore. The night of the holiday gala arrived with an air of unease that I couldn't shake. It's strange, isn't it, how your instincts whisper to you, warning you of what's to come? I should have listened to that voice, but instead, I let Sophia's excitement sweep me along. She was practically glowing as she got ready, trying on one dress after another until she found the perfect one, a sleek, figure-hugging red number that left little to the imagination. When she walked into the living room, I couldn't help but stare. She was breathtaking, no doubt about it. But my admiration was tinged with unease. "What do you think?" she asked, spinning around with a playful smile. "You look stunning," I said honestly, though my chest tightened. I didn't like the idea of every man at that party seeing her like this, but I kept my thoughts to myself. Before we left, I hesitated, hoping to talk her out of going. "Sophia," I began, "maybe we can skip the party this year? Stay in, have a quiet night together?" She laughed, brushing off my suggestion. "Oh, come on, Daniel. We barely go out anymore. I need this. We need this." Her excitement was contagious, even if my heart wasn't in it. The drive to the party was silent, apart from the occasional comment about the music on the radio. Sophia didn't notice my tension, or maybe she did and chose to ignore it. When we arrived, the party was already in full swing. Music filled the air, and laughter echoed through the room as guests mingled and danced. As soon as we walked in, Marcus Thorne appeared like a vulture circling its prey. He greeted me with a handshake that felt more like a challenge and turned his attention to Sophia, his eyes lingering a little too long. "Sophia, you look incredible," he said, taking her hand and pressing his lips to it in an exaggerated gesture. My jaw tightened, but Sophia just laughed it off. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, her tone polite but warm. I tried to brush it aside, telling myself it was harmless. After all, she was here with me. The night went on, and I tried to enjoy myself, mingling with coworkers and catching up with old friends. But my eyes kept drifting to Sophia. She was a social butterfly, flitting from group to group, laughing and dancing. She seemed to be having the time of her life. And then there was Marcus. He was always nearby, hovering like a shadow. At one point, he took her by the arm, leading her toward a group of new employees. "You don't mind, do you, Daniel?" he asked, not bothering to wait for my response. Sophia gave me a quick, reassuring smile before disappearing into the crowd with him. I tried to shake off the nagging feeling in my gut, joining a group of guys playing a drinking game. I wasn't much of a drinker, but I pretended to sip my whiskey, my mind elsewhere. Every so often, I'd glance around the room, searching for Sophia. I saw her dancing with a couple of people, laughing and twirling under the flashing lights. It seemed innocent enough, or so I told myself. An hour passed, maybe more, and I realized I hadn't seen her in a while. I asked a few people if they'd seen her, but no one seemed to know where she was. My stomach tightened, that whisper of unease growing louder. Finally, I ran into her friend, Jenna. "Have you seen Sophia?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Jenna hesitated, her eyes darting away. "I think I saw her heading toward the conference rooms with Marcus," she said, her voice uncertain. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Without a word, I turned and made my way toward the conference rooms, my heart pounding. The hallway was dimly lit, the noise from the party fading into the background. As I approached, I heard it, a sound that stopped me in my tracks, a woman's voice, soft and breathless, mingled with low, masculine murmurs. My blood ran cold. I reached the conference room door and pushed it open. My worst fears materialized. There they were, Sophia, leaning against a large mahogany table, and Marcus, his hands possessively on her waist. They were so engrossed in their hushed, intimate moment that they didn't see me standing in the doorway. For a moment, I was paralyzed, unable to process what I was seeing. My mind screamed at me to move, to do something, but my body refused to obey. Finally, I stepped forward, and they froze, their heads snapping toward me in shock. "Daniel," Sophia gasped, scrambling to pull herself together. "I can explain." "Explain." I spat, my voice icy. "Explain what, Sophia? How you've been betraying me. How you've made a fool of me." Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. But I couldn't feel anything. Not anger, not sadness, not love. Just an empty, hollow void where my heart used to be. In that moment, I knew our marriage was over. Whatever love we had was gone, replaced by a cold, unrelenting rage. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was the death of everything I believed in, everything I thought we were. And there was no coming back from that. I stood there, frozen, watching the scene that would forever redefine my life. They scrambled like cornered animals caught in the act. Sophia, her hair disheveled and cheeks flushed, was a stranger in that moment. Marcus, the smug vice president, barely had the decency to look embarrassed. If anything, he seemed amused, like this was some kind of game to him. For a moment, it felt like the world stopped turning. Tom stood still, and all I could hear was the deafening sound of my own heartbeat. My body refused to move, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were showing me. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. "Daniel," Sophia's voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. She hastily pulled her dress back into place, her face a mask of panic and guilt. "I can explain," she said, her voice trembling. "Explain." I finally managed to choke out, my voice cold and hollow. "Explain what, Sophia? How you've been sleeping with him. How you've been making a fool out of me for years." Her eyes widened, and she shook her head frantically. "It's not what it looks like." "Don't you dare." I cut her off, my voice sharp as a blade. "Don't insult me by pretending there's some innocent explanation for this." Marcus, meanwhile, had the audacity to smirk, like he was enjoying the show. "Calm down, Daniel," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "These things happen. No need to make a scene." I turned to him, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "You don't get to talk to me," I growled, taking a step closer. "Not after what you've done." He raised his hands in mock surrender, still smirking. All right, he said. No harm meant. No harm meant. Those words sent a fresh wave of rage coursing through me. How dare he treat this like it was nothing, like it was some harmless fling that didn't matter? "You think this is a joke?" I snapped, my voice rising. "You think you can walk into my life, take what's mine, and walk away unscathed?" Sophia stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Daniel, please," she begged. "I made a mistake. A horrible, unforgivable mistake. But I swear, it didn't mean anything. I still love you." I turned to her, my anger giving way to something darker, something colder. "Love," I said, my voice dripping with venom. "You don't get to use that word. Not after this. Not after you betrayed everything it stands for." She flinched as if I'd struck her, her tears falling faster. I know I hurt you, she said, her voice cracking. I know I broke your trust. But please, Daniel, let me make it right. Let me prove to you that I can fix this. I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in the small room. Fix this? How do you propose we fix this, Sophia? Do we rewind time and erase what I just saw? Do you promise to pretend this never happened while I live with the memory of you with him? She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. What could she say? There was nothing that could make this right. Marcus, who had been silent during our exchange, finally spoke up. Look, Daniel, let's be reasonable. We're all adults here. Things happen. No need to blow it out of proportion. That was it. The final straw. I lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. His smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of genuine fear. You think you can walk into my life, destroy my marriage, and walk away unscathed? I hissed, my face inches from his. You don't know who you're messing with. Sophia screamed, trying to pull me away, but I didn't budge. Marcus squirmed in my grip, his bravado crumbling. All right, he gasped. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for this to happen. I let him go, and he slumped against the wall, breathing heavily. I turned back to Sophia, who was standing there, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I felt a pang of something grief, maybe, or the faint echo of the love I once had for her. But it was fleeting, replaced by the cold, hard truth. Get out, I said, my voice low and steady. What? She asked, her voice barely audible. You heard me, I said. Get out of my sight. Go back to the party. Go home. Go wherever you want. Just stay the hell away from me. She hesitated, her eyes pleading with me to reconsider. But there was no going back, not after this. As she walked past me, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just an emptiness that I knew would never be filled. Marcus followed her, throwing me one last glance before disappearing into the hallway. I stood there for a long time after they left, staring at the empty room where my life had just fallen apart. This was the moment everything changed, the moment I realized that the woman I loved was gone, replaced by a stranger I couldn't trust. And there was no coming back from that. When the fog of disbelief finally lifted, what replaced it was a storm, raw, unrelenting, and unstoppable. Rage surged through me, cold and calculated, not the fiery kind that burns out quickly. This was the kind that stayed, simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. The moment Sophia and Marcus walked out of that room, I followed. Not immediately. I needed to think, needed to make sure every move I made counted. A crowd was no place for what needed to happen. No, this was a matter to be settled in private, where no one could interrupt. I stepped back into the ballroom, scanning the sea of faces. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses, it all seemed surreal, like I was watching it through a distorted lens. None of it mattered. None of them mattered. All I could see was her, standing by the bar, chatting and laughing as though nothing had happened. Sophia was good at wearing masks. It struck me then how much I'd been fooled by hers. She looked radiant, flawless, like the perfect wife. But I knew better now. That mask was cracking, and I was about to rip it off completely. I walked straight up to her, ignoring the curious glances from those nearby. Sophia, I said, my voice low but firm. She turned, her smile faltering when she saw my face. Daniel, she began, her tone uncertain, like she wasn't sure which version of me she was dealing with. We need to talk, I said, not giving her a chance to finish. My tone brooked no argument. Marcus, ever the sleaze, was nearby, watching us like he thought he was untouchable. I glanced at him briefly, and he smirked. That smirk. It took everything in me not to lunge at him right then and there. But not yet. This wasn't the time. I grabbed Sophia's arm, not roughly but firmly enough to let her know I wasn't in the mood for resistance, and guided her toward a quieter corner of the room. Daniel, please, she said once we were alone, her voice breaking. I can explain. Don't, I interrupted, my voice cold. Don't insult me by pretending there's an explanation for this. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they had no effect on me. Not anymore. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered, her voice trembling. You made a mistake, I repeated, my tone sharp. A mistake is forgetting to pick up the dry cleaning. This was a choice, Sophia. A deliberate, calculated choice. Don't you dare minimize it. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her tears fell freely now, and for a brief moment, I felt the ghost of pity. But it was fleeting, swept away by the storm raging inside me. You don't get to cry, I said, my voice low but deadly. You don't get to act like the victim here. Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've destroyed? Her silence was answer enough. Just then, a familiar voice broke through my thoughts. Everything okay here? It was Mark, one of my closest friends, standing a few feet away with a look of concern. I glanced at him, and then back at Sophia. Not yet, I said, my voice tight. Mark nodded, understanding more than I needed to say. We'll be nearby, he said, before stepping back into the crowd, but not so far that he couldn't intervene if things escalated. Sophia looked at me, her tear-streaked face filled with desperation. Please, Daniel, she said. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. We can. I held up a hand to stop her. Fix this? There's no fixing this, Sophia. You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything we built, everything I thought we had. Before she could respond, I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a near whisper. But don't worry, I said, my tone calm but laced with venom. I'm not going to yell or cause a scene or make a spectacle of this. No, Sophia, that's not my style. You and Marcus, you're going to pay for what you've done. But it's going to be on my terms. Her eyes widened in fear, and for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of something real. She knew I wasn't bluffing. And as for Marcus, I added, glancing in his direction, he doesn't know it yet, but he's about to learn a very painful lesson about what happens when you mess with the wrong man. With that, I stepped back, my decision made. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the dignity and respect that Sophia and Marcus had tried to strip away. I walked away, leaving her standing there, her tears unnoticed by the crowd around us. Whatever happened next, it would be on my terms. And I was just getting started. The drive home was a war waged in silence. No accusations, no tears, just the low hum of the car engine and the crushing weight of betrayal. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my jaw clenched so tightly that it ached. Sophia sat beside me, a mere silhouette of the woman I once knew. Her once confident posture was slumped, her head bowed. Every so often, I caught a glimpse of her wiping her tears in the corner of my eye, but I didn't look at her directly. I couldn't. The road stretched ahead, illuminated only by the car's headlights. Each passing streetlight felt like a countdown to something I couldn't yet define. The silence between us was heavy, oppressive. I could feel her wanting to say something, to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. But I wasn't ready to hear her excuses, her apologies. She finally broke the silence, her voice shaky and tentative. Daniel. I didn't respond. My grip on the wheel tightened as I focused on the road ahead. Daniel, please, she tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. Talk to me. Talk to you. I said, my tone cold and distant. What, exactly, would you like me to say, Sophia? Should we discuss how you've been lying to me for years? Or maybe you'd like me to congratulate you on your choice of lover. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I know I hurt you, she said, her voice breaking. I know what I did was wrong. Wrong. I cut her off, my voice sharp. Wrong doesn't even begin to cover it, Sophia. What you did was a betrayal of the worst kind. You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything we built together, everything I believed in. Her tears fell faster, and she buried her face in her hands. I was stupid, she sobbed. It was a mistake, Daniel. A terrible mistake. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and devoid of humor. A mistake, I said. Mistakes are accidental, Sophia. They're things you don't see coming, things you regret the moment they happen. But this was a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice that you made over and over again. She didn't respond, her sobs the only sound in the car. I glanced at her briefly, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. You knew what you were doing, I said, my voice low but firm. You knew the risks, the consequences, and you did it anyway. And now you want me to what? Forgive you? Pretend this never happened. I don't expect you to forgive me, she whispered, her voice trembling. But I love you, Daniel. I love you more than anything. Please let me make this right. Love, I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Don't insult me, Sophia. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. Love doesn't destroy. It doesn't betray. She didn't say anything, her silence more damning than any word she could have spoken. For the rest of the drive, neither of us said a word. The silence was deafening, filled with all the things we didn't know how to say. My mind raced, replaying everything that had happened, everything I had seen. The image of her with him, The sound of her voice as she laughed at his jokes, the way she looked at him. These were things I would never be able to forget. When we finally pulled into the driveway, I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. Our house. The place where we had built a life together, where we had shared so many memories. It felt different now, hollow and empty, a shell of what it once was. Sophia hesitated, her hand on the door handle. "Daniel," she began, her voice soft, "can we please talk about this?" I turned to her, my expression cold. "There's nothing to talk about, Sophia," I said. "Not tonight. Not ever." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. Whatever pity I might have felt for her was buried beneath layers of anger and betrayal. "Get your things," I said, my voice flat. "I'll drive you to your sister's." She looked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Daniel, please." "Now," I said firmly, cutting her off. She nodded silently, her shoulders slumping in defeat as she stepped out of the car. I watched her go, my heart heavy with a pain I couldn't yet process. As I waited for her to gather her belongings, I stared at the house. The memories we had built there flashed through my mind. It didn't feel like home anymore. It was just a place, a reminder of what I had lost. By the time she returned, I was ready to drive again, ready to put as much distance as possible between us and the life we had shared. This wasn't just the end of a drive. It was the end of everything. Driving to Sophia's sister's house wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was knowing that this wasn't over. Not for me, not for her, and certainly not for Marcus. Revenge had become more than an abstract thought. It was a plan, precise and inevitable. But first, I needed to send a message. Sophia sat quietly in the passenger seat, her tears long dried, her eyes vacant. The energy to cry had left her, and I could feel her surrender. The silence between us was a battlefield, with the weight of unspoken words pressing down like a heavy fog. We pulled into the driveway of her sister's house, but I didn't turn off the car. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, staring straight ahead. "Get out," I said, my tone sharp and final. She turned to me, her voice trembling. "Daniel, Not here," I interrupted. "Not now. This isn't the end, Sophia. But for tonight, you stay here. Tomorrow, we'll deal with what's next." She hesitated, her hand hovering over the door handle. I could feel her desperation, her fear. But I didn't care. Whatever emotions she had now didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the reckoning. She opened the door slowly and stepped out. I watched her walk toward the house, her shoulders hunched as if the weight of her guilt had finally settled on her. She knocked on the door, and when her sister opened it, I reversed the car without a second glance. I drove with no clear destination, my mind racing. This wasn't just about Sophia anymore. This was about Marcus, the man who thought he could take what was mine and walk away unscathed. He had no idea what was coming for him. The next morning, I made my first move. I contacted the company's HR department anonymously and left a detailed report of Marcus's indiscretions. I didn't stop at his affair with Sophia. I listed every inappropriate comment, every questionable interaction, and every late-night business meeting he'd ever had with female colleagues. Then, I called a lawyer. Adultery was still grounds for a legal claim in our state, and I intended to make use of it. The lawyer listened intently as I outlined everything: the affair, the betrayal, the witnesses. "We'll start with a lawsuit for alienation of affection," he said, his tone steady and professional. "If you're willing to go public, we'll make sure he pays for what he's done." "Public?" I asked, my mind racing. "Marcus Thorne is a high-profile figure," the lawyer explained. "A scandal like this won't just ruin his personal life. It'll damage his career, his reputation, everything he's built. Are you prepared for that?" I paused for a moment, considering the implications. Then I nodded. "Yes," I said firmly. "He deserves it." The next step was harder, confronting Marcus's wife, Clara. She didn't deserve to be dragged into this, but I needed her to know the truth. I knocked on her door that evening, Sophia's confession still ringing in my ears. Clara answered, her expression polite but wary. "Can I help you?" "My name is Daniel Vance," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Your husband, Marcus, has been having an affair with my wife for years." Her face changed instantly. Shock, pain, then a slow realization. She stepped aside, motioning for me to come in. I told her everything, every detail, every instance of betrayal, sparing her nothing. She deserved the truth, no matter how painful it was. When I was done, she sat silently, her hands trembling. "I always suspected," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But to hear it confirmed like this, "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. She shook her head. "Don't apologize. He's the one who should be sorry. And he will be." We parted on uneasy terms, bound by shared betrayal but separated by the pain it caused. Over the next few days, the fallout began. Marcus was called into HR for a meeting that ended with him being escorted out of the building. News of the affair spread like wildfire, and his professional reputation crumbled. Clara filed for divorce within the week, her resolve as unyielding as my own. Sophia, meanwhile, tried to reach out to me, sending tearful voicemails and pleading texts. But I didn't respond. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. The house, our house, was the final battleground. She begged me not to sell it, to let her keep it as some twisted memento of the life we once shared. I refused. I didn't want any reminders of what we'd lost, of the love that had turned to ash. Justice was a cold, bitter thing. But it was mine. I had taken back the power they tried to strip away. And for the first time since that fateful night, I felt a sliver of peace. But peace was fleeting, and the wounds they left behind would never fully heal. This was the fallout. A broken marriage, a ruined man, and a love story reduced to rubble. And I was left to pick up the pieces, one by one. The day I picked Sophia up from her sister's house was the day I knew I'd never see her the same way again. She waited on the porch, clutching a small suitcase, her face pale and drawn. As I pulled up, her eyes searched mine for any sign of forgiveness, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. The drive to the lawyer's office was silent, not the heavy silence of betrayal but the hollow kind, the kind that comes after all the shouting and crying is done. The end was here, and we both knew it. When we arrived, she hesitated before stepping out of the car. "Daniel," she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't look at her. "Let's get this over with," I said coldly, stepping out and closing the door behind me. Inside the office, the atmosphere was clinical, detached. The lawyer greeted us with a neutral expression, motioning for us to sit. Sophia's hands trembled as she signed the divorce papers, her pen hovering over the last signature. "Daniel," she said again, her voice breaking. "Please, can we talk?" I stared at her, my expression unyielding. "There's nothing left to say, Sophia. You've made your choices, and now we're dealing with the consequences." Her eyes filled with tears, but I refused to let her see the part of me that still ached for the woman I thought I knew, the woman who no longer existed. The lawyer cleared his throat. "If you both agree to these terms, the divorce will proceed without contestation. Is that correct?" Sophia nodded reluctantly, her tears falling onto the paper as she signed. I took the pen and scrawled my name across the bottom, sealing the end of our marriage with a single stroke. As we left the office, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. 6 years of love, trust, and shared memories reduced to a stack of papers and a polite handshake. It felt surreal, like stepping out of a dream and into a nightmare. Sophia followed me back to the car, her steps hesitant. When we were both inside, she turned to me, her voice trembling. "Daniel, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I've ruined everything, but I need you to know that I'll regret this for the rest of my life." I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. "Good," I said quietly. "You should." Her sobs filled the car, but I didn't offer comfort. I couldn't, not anymore. We drove to what was once our home, now just a shell of what it used to be. The house that held so many memories, so many moments of happiness, now felt like a stranger's. "Go inside," I told her as I parked. "Pack whatever you need. You have until tomorrow to get your things. After that, the locks will be changed." She nodded, her face crumpling as she stepped out of the car. I watched her walk up to the door, her shoulders hunched under the weight of her guilt. I stayed in the car, unwilling to set foot in a place that now felt tainted. As I waited, I thought about everything that had led us here. The love, the betrayal, the anger, the hurt. It all swirled together into a storm I couldn't escape. When she returned, carrying a box of belongings, she hesitated by the car. "Daniel," she said softly, "do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" I looked at her, my expression unreadable. "No," I said simply. Her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. She just nodded and placed the box in the trunk. As I drove her to her temporary lodging, the silence returned, heavier than ever. This was the end, the final chapter of a story that had started with so much promise and ended in ashes. When we arrived, she stepped out of the car, her movements slow and deliberate. She turned to face me one last time, her eyes searching mine. "Goodbye, Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. I couldn't. As I watched her walk away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, relief. This was it. The end of a love story that had turned into a tragedy. I drove away, not looking back, the weight of finality settling over me. Whatever the future held, it wouldn't include Sophia. And that was a truth I'd have to learn to live with. I wish I could say that after the papers were signed, the anger, the pain, and the memories left me. That I woke up the next day feeling lighter, free of the weight Sophia and Marcus had heaped onto my shoulders. But the truth is, there was no sudden release. The world didn't feel any less suffocating, and my mind didn't stop replaying that night. People talk about closure as if it's a destination you arrive at. It's not. It's a myth, a story we tell ourselves to make the emptiness more bearable. I sat in the stillness of what used to be our home, a place that now felt unfamiliar. The photos were gone, the bed too big, the silence deafening. This was my life now, a hollow shell of what it had been. The love I'd had for Sophia wasn't a switch I could just flip off. It lingered, a phantom limb, aching with the memory of what it once was. Every room carried a memory. The kitchen table where we'd shared lazy Sunday breakfasts, the couch where we'd binge-watch terrible reality shows and laugh at contestants who took themselves too seriously, the bedroom where we whispered secrets and made promises that, in hindsight, neither of us could keep. But now, all of it felt tainted. Each memory was a painful reminder of what had been taken from me. I used to think of myself as a strong man, someone who could weather any storm. But this broke me in ways I didn't think possible. And yet, there was something in the pain that steadied me. It reminded me that I was still here, still standing, even if I felt shattered. The revenge against Marcus had been satisfying in the moment. Watching him lose his job, his reputation, and his marriage felt like justice. But it didn't fill the void. I'd stripped him of everything, yet I didn't feel whole. That's the thing about revenge. It doesn't heal you. It's like scratching an itch that never stops itching. Sophia's calls and texts had stopped after the divorce was finalized. For weeks, I had ignored them, each one a mix of apologies, regrets, and desperate pleas. But then she went silent, and her absence was its own kind of torment. It's strange how you can crave the very thing that destroyed you, how the heart can cling to what the mind rejects. I tried to move on. Friends invited me out, tried to distract me with sports games and bar nights. But none of it worked. I'd sit in the crowd or at the bar, surrounded by noise, and still feel completely alone. People would talk, laugh, joke, and I'd nod along, pretending to listen, pretending to care. The nights were the worst. Lying in that bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence pressing down on me. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it was filled with dreams that felt more like nightmares, dreams where Sophia and I were happy again, only for me to wake up and remember the truth. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to erase every good memory, replace them with the image of her with Marcus, the sound of her voice lying to me. But the mind doesn't work that way. The good memories stayed, and they hurt the most. There were moments when I'd question myself. What had I done wrong? Could I have been a better husband? Did I miss the signs? The doubts gnawed at me, even though I knew, deep down, that the blame wasn't mine. Sophia had made her choices, and I had to live with the fallout. Eventually, I started to rebuild, slowly, painfully. I began to piece my life back together. I took down the photos, packed away the mementos, and started making the house my own. It was hard, but it was necessary. And yet, there were still days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, days when the silence was too loud, when the memories were too vivid, when the pain felt like it would never end. People say time heals all wounds, but I don't believe that. Time doesn't heal, it just dulls the edges, makes the pain more manageable. Some wounds never fully close. They become a part of you, a scar that reminds you of what you've lost. This was my life now. Not the one I had planned, not the one I had hoped for, but the one I had. And if there was one thing I knew, it was that I couldn't let the pain define me. Sophia had taken so much from me, but she hadn't taken everything. I still had myself, and that had to be enough.